I'm 52. My name is Rachel. I've been married to Greg for over 25 years. We raised 2 kids, built a comfortable life, and for the most part, lived quietly, predictably. I was the kind of woman who used to believe that love, once found, was meant to stay the same. Like a stone in a river, unchanged by the water rushing past. I prided myself on loyalty, on stability, on doing the right thing. Always. But some moments don't care how many promises you've made. Some moments arrive without warning and leave a mark so deep you can't go back to who you were before. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. It started on a Thursday afternoon. I remember because the sun had that warm, honey-colored glow that only late autumn brings, golden light pouring through the kitchen windows, stretching across the tile like melted butter. I was standing at the sink, rinsing off the last of the lunch dishes, when Greg called. "Hey, hon," he said in that rushed tone he always used when something was wrong, but he didn't want to say it outright. "Listen, I forgot I have that quarterly team review today. Can you do me a favor and drop off the catering at the office?" The catering. His company was hosting a small appreciation lunch for their leadership team. Just a dozen people, nothing formal. I had helped him plan it, picked out the menu, even double-checked the delivery. But the restaurant had called that morning. Some driver mix-up, and they wouldn't be able to bring it over until after 2 p.m. Greg had looked at me sheepishly, and I'd laughed it off. "I'll drop it off myself. No big deal." At the time, it wasn't. So there I was, walking through the sleek glass doors of Langford and Mayfield Consulting, juggling a pair of oversized catering bags and trying not to sweat through my cardigan. The receptionist greeted me, and before I could even ask where to go, someone called out my name. "Mrs. Jennings." I turned and saw him, Daniel Langford, the founder, Greg's boss. He looked just like I remembered from the holiday party last year. Tall, well-groomed, with a kind of quiet confidence. Older than Greg by maybe a decade, but he carried himself like someone who had never stopped learning, never stopped adapting. He wasn't flashy, just present. "Let me help you with that," he said, crossing the lobby in a few strides. We made small talk in the elevator. He asked about the kids, complimented the food. He remembered I used to teach art classes at the community center, something I hadn't even brought up in years. When we got to the conference room, it was empty. "They're running late from a meeting," he said, setting the bags down. "You're welcome to wait, or I can take it from here." I hesitated. Something about the space, the soft lighting, the clean lines, the faint scent of bergamot and old wood, made me want to linger. "I don't want to be in the way," I said, placing the last box on the table. "You're not," he replied, then looked at me with this gentle seriousness. "Actually, do you have a minute?" I nodded, unsure why. He walked over to the window and gestured toward the city below. "You ever just stop and look at it all? Not the buildings, but the people. The movement. Every single one of them living their own little story." I stepped closer, unsure if he was really asking me something deeper. "I used to," I admitted, "before the noise of everything got louder. You stop looking when you stop expecting anything new." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's a shame." We stood there in silence for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, eyes on the street that pulsed below like a living thing. It should have been awkward. It wasn't. "Greg speaks highly of you," he said, turning to me. "That's kind of him," I replied. "We've been through a lot together. He's always been solid, dependable." Daniel nodded. Sometimes dependable people miss things. I felt something shift in the room then, not physically, but emotionally. A weight I couldn't name. He continued, quieter now. There's something admirable about staying on the same path, but there's also something brave about realizing when it no longer leads where you thought it would. My breath caught slightly. I wasn't sure if we were still talking about Greg, or me, or Daniel himself. The sound of laughter from down the hall broke whatever moment had just passed. He stepped back, clearing his throat lightly. "Thank you for bringing the food, Rachel," he said. "Really, this means more than you know." I nodded, but my voice didn't come right away. I turned to go, then paused at the door. "Daniel, do you always talk like that to your employees' wives?" He smiled, not playful, not smug, just knowing. Only the ones who look like they've stopped expecting anything new. I walked out without looking back, but something followed me home that day, something I couldn't name yet, a question I hadn't dared ask myself in years. And it was only the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night. Greg lay next to me, snoring softly, one arm draped across my hip like it had for the last 2 decades. But I couldn't stop staring at the ceiling, that quiet hum of streetlight flickering through the curtains, my mind circling back to that conversation with Daniel. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Like he saw something in me that I had buried long ago, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. The next morning, I went through the motions. I made coffee, fed the cat, scrolled through my phone while waiting for the toast to pop. Greg rushed out the door in his usual blur, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek without even really looking. Didn't blame him. We were both just operating. Like old machines that still worked, but not as smoothly as they used to. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hi, Rachel. It's Daniel Langford." I froze, toast halfway to my mouth. "I hope this isn't a bad time. I wanted to thank you again for yesterday, and I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to meet me for coffee sometime this week. No pressure, just a conversation." There was a long pause before he added, almost softly, "I think you have more to say than you let yourself believe." I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But something in me, something quiet and old and aching, whispered yes. And so, 2 days later, I found myself sitting across from him in a small corner cafe near the park. I wore a soft blue blouse I hadn't touched in years. Not for anyone in particular. Just for me. Daniel was already there when I arrived, dressed in a charcoal coat, sipping something that smelled like cinnamon. He stood as I walked in. "You came," he said, like it genuinely surprised him. "I did," I replied. I figured if I kept thinking about our last conversation, maybe there was something more to it. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about Greg. Not really about work, but about books, about art, about the things we used to love before life made everything so practical. He told me he used to play jazz piano. I told him I used to sculpt. "You say that like it was another lifetime," he said. "Sometimes it feels that way." At one point, he leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. "Do you ever feel like you disappeared?" The question hit so hard, I almost laughed. Or cried. I wasn't sure which. "Yes," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Me too." We didn't touch. We didn't flirt, but there was an intimacy in that space that wrapped around us like a secret. I left before it could turn into anything more. I walked quickly through the park, my heels crunching over brittle orange leaves, heart thudding with something I hadn't felt in years. Awareness. awareness of myself, my body, my breath. When I got home, Greg was in the den, watching TV, beer in hand. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up. I stared at him, at the way he didn't notice the blue blouse, at the way he hadn't asked in years what I cared about. "Fine," I said, setting down my purse. But I knew something had shifted, not because of Daniel, but because for the first time in forever, I felt like someone saw me. And I didn't know what that meant yet. But I knew it wasn't nothing. The days that followed were quiet on the outside, but inside, it was a different story. I found myself watching everything more closely. The way Greg would hum under his breath while brushing his teeth. The way he'd leave his coffee mug in the same place on the kitchen counter, always forgetting to rinse it. The way we talked, if you could even call it that. It was more like passing along information. Dinner's in the fridge. The car needs gas. Did you pay the bill? There was no malice in it, just routine. Just time doing what time does best, softening edges, smoothing things over until the once vivid colors of love fade into beige. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was overthinking things, that I was just reacting to a random conversation with a man I barely knew. But then Daniel emailed me. He didn't ask for anything. He just sent a photograph. A simple shot on sculpture, clay, unfinished, delicate fingers reaching upward like they were trying to touch the sky. Saw this and thought of our talk. Reminded me of you. That was all he wrote. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't touched clay in over a decade. I didn't even know if I could still make something beautiful with my hands. But the thought stayed with me, lingering like a faint perfume on the skin. The next week, I drove to the art store on a whim. Bought a small block of sculpting clay. Brought it home. Hid it in the back of the coat closet like it was something illicit. That night, Greg had a late meeting. I set up in the garage with an old worktable and a cracked bowl of water. It felt strange at first, like trying to remember the words to a song I hadn't sung in years. But the more I worked the clay, the more natural it felt. Like coming home to something I'd forgotten I'd ever loved. I didn't tell anyone, especially not Greg, but I did take a photo. And I sent it to Daniel. His reply came within the hour. There she is. 3 words, but they hit me like a wave. He wasn't flirting. It wasn't like that. He was just seeing me, naming the part of me I'd tucked away for so long I wasn't sure it had survived. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it felt like slipping into a warm bath. No judgment, no expectations, just presence. Then came the night everything turned. Greg and I were at a company dinner. Formal, corporate, forgettable. Round tables, dry chicken, polite applause. I wore a black dress I used to love, fitted but tasteful. Greg didn't comment on it. He was too busy talking shop with his coworkers. Daniel was across the room. We didn't speak, but at one point I looked up and caught him watching me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, in a way that made me feel alive. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the rooftop patio to get some air. The city was lit up like a jewel box, so full of life and motion, it made my chest ache. I heard footsteps behind me. "I thought you might be out here," Daniel said softly. I didn't turn around, needed a minute. He stood beside me, not touching, just close enough that I could feel his presence. "Are you happy, Rachel?" he asked. The question hovered in the air like smoke. Safe, I said after a long pause. He nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. I turned toward him. You shouldn't be here. Maybe not. And then, for the first time, he reached out. Not to hold me, just to brush his fingers along mine, barely there, like a question waiting to be answered. My heart jumped. Not from fear, from recognition. I didn't move. But I didn't pull away either. And that one small touch changed everything. I wish I could say I knew what I was doing, that I had some plan, some neatly folded logic tucked into my back pocket. But the truth is, I was lost in a feeling I hadn't known in years, a kind of quiet thunder beneath the skin. Not lust, not fantasy, something deeper, a hunger to be known, to be understood without explanation. After that night on the rooftop, I didn't see Daniel for nearly 2 weeks. He didn't call, didn't write. At first, I felt relief, then disappointment, then shame, and underneath it all, confusion, because despite everything, I still loved Greg, in a weathered, lived-in way. Like an old song I didn't sing anymore, but couldn't bring myself to delete from the playlist. One rainy afternoon, I found myself back in the garage. The sculpture had grown, its form rough, but taking shape. 2 hands reaching for each other, not quite touching. The clay felt cold, but honest. I was smoothing the curve of a wrist when I heard the car pull up. Greg was home early. He came into the garage without knocking. "Didn't know you were out here," he said, looking around. I turned, suddenly self-conscious, clay smudged on my blouse. He walked over slowly. "You made this." I nodded. "Just something I used to do. A long time ago." He stared at the sculpture. "It's beautiful." That caught me off guard. Greg hadn't used that word about anything I'd done in years. "You never said you missed it." "I didn't think it mattered," I replied honestly. Life got full. Kids, bills, routines. He touched the edge of the base gently. Maybe we let too much of ourselves go. Something in his voice was different. Not distant. Not robotic. Human. He turned to me, really looked at me. "Is there someone else?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "I just need to know," he said, quieter now. "There's not. Like that," I said. "But there is someone who reminded me what it feels like to be seen." Greg looked down. The silence between us grew heavy. "Is it over?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. But later that evening, I sat alone in the bedroom, staring at a blank text message to Daniel. I typed, "Thank you for waking me up, but I need to try and find what I lost before I can start something new." I hit send. No reply came. But that was okay, because this wasn't about him anymore. That night, I sat with Greg in the living room. No TV, no distractions, just us. We talked, not small talk, real talk, about who we were, who we became, what we missed. And as he reached over to take my hand, something settled inside me. Not certainty, not forgiveness, but a beginning, or maybe, just maybe, a return.